All right, everybody, welcome back. Hope you guys are doing well still. A little bit later in the day on Wednesday. And now we have our second part of the weekly draft prospect look ahead for the Seahawks as we evaluate the players that are playing the best from week to week. And again, I think most weeks this year, I'm going to have to split this up into two parts because we've expanded out. And I want to do offense in the first half, so this one's going to be defense. And defensively, we're again going to focus in on particular positions. I'm going to start with nose tackle. I don't think this team is going to be looking too heavily at defensive line, like defensive tackles, because of the investment they already have there. Nose tackle is a different story, though. They don't really have an investment in anybody past this year at the nose tackle spot. And there really only were two guys that I could highlight in any way this week. I searched and I searched, but the two big names continue to be king. Tyleik Williams of Ohio State had a really good game for the Buckeyes. 7 tackles, 1.5 for loss. He had a sack, had 2 QB pressures. Ohio State allowed 6 points and 47 rushing yards, which was 1.3 yards a carry. Easy opponent, but they were fairly dominant. So that's an 81.8 PFF grade for him. Really strong stuff. And Nazir Stackhouse of Georgia. So it's the two guys that you're probably going to hear about a lot this year. Now, individually, he didn't do that much, just 2 tackles, but Georgia only allowed 3 points and 46 rushing yards against Clemson, which is not a very good offense, probably, but it's a legitimate offense, right? It's a real offense. It's a real team you're playing. You're not playing Saginaw Valley, Wachu State, or anything like that. Clemson is a real team. 2.0 yards a carry, 62.6 PFF grade, so nothing stand out, but honestly, there aren't that many true nose tackles in this draft class. Dante Corleone is dealing with blood clots or something now, so he may never be part of the conversation this year, to be perfectly honest. And after you get past that, it's very thin. So those two guys are all I had. Edge rusher was the next position I wanted to take a look at here. We do have a good crop of edge rushers, and some of these guys really showed out in the first week. Starting with another Ohio State defender, JT Tumoluau. JT Tumoluau. We'll call him JT for short. I think he'll be okay with that. 3 tackles, but 1.5 for loss, sack and a half. 2 QB pressures. Ohio State's defense, of course, allowed 6 points, only 177 total yards, 65.6 PFF grade. So good start for JT here. He's coming out of the gates hot. Ashton Gilotte, or Gilotte, I don't know if the E is silent there, of Louisville. Also a pretty good start for him. 4 tackles, tackle and a half for loss, 1 sack, 3 QB pressures. And Louisville allowed 0 points and only 106 yards. So very dominant. He had a dominant PFF grade, 87.1, so good stuff there. Oklahoma gives us Ethan Downs, 2 tackles, 1 for a loss, 1 sack, 2 pressures, 3 points allowed by OU's defense, 197 yards, and 81.1 PFF grade. So another edge player who's generating positive things happening on that defense. These are both guys who are projected to be like day 3 picks, I think, maybe day 2 if they're lucky. So these are guys that matter for draft purposes. We got Mike Green of Marshall, the Thundering Herd. 9 tackles for him. Very high usage. Tackle and a half for loss, sack and a half, 4 pressures, 3 points allowed by Marshall, 252 yards, 84.2 PFF grade. So great game by Mike Green. And a little bit of an unsung hero for Michigan here. That's a very high-profile team, but Josiah Stewart is not one of their most high-profile names, but he had a nice game. 5 tackles, 3 in the backfield, including 2 sacks, 4 QB pressures. Michigan allowed 10 points, 244 yards, and Stewart had a 91.3 PFF grade. That is one of the best you're going to find on the defensive side of the ball this week, I think. So, good start for the edge rushers. Liking what I'm seeing there. Linebacker, off-ball linebacker. You've got a couple of guys that I mentioned in my video yesterday. Jalen Walker, Georgia, 6 tackles, 1.5 for loss, 1.5 sacks. By the way, sacks tend to be tackles for loss. If you're noticing like alignment in those numbers, there's often a reason why. So 2 pressures, 3 points allowed, 46 rushing yards allowed by Georgia, 2 yards a carry, 70.4 PFF grade. This is a very important year for Jalen Walker. Off to a good start. That's a good start for him for sure. Harold Perkins Jr. for LSU. LSU winning dramatically against USC. Not necessarily dominant or anything like that, but he did have 8 tackles, including half a TFL. They allowed 27 points and 72 rushing yards. Or excuse me, LSU did not win dramatically. They lost dramatically, but I think Harold Perkins Jr. played a pretty good game. USC only ran for 72 rushing yards, 62.7 PFF grade. Another guy who's going to have to show that he understands the cerebral element of playing stack linebacker. Nicholas Martin here, or Nick Martin here, of I think this is Oklahoma State. A lot of OSUs out there, though. 10 tackles, 1 for loss, 1 sack, 2 pressures, 20 points allowed, and 124 rush yards allowed by his defense, which is okay. Not super standout here, 60.9 PFF grade, but he does get to the double-digit tackles, notable. Does generate some stuff as a cover man, as a pressure man, excuse me. Deontay Lawson of Alabama, little bit of a lesser-known name here maybe, but could be not for long. Alabama's defense was good in this game. 9 tackles for Lawson, a tackle for loss, 0 points allowed, 42 rushing yards allowed, 76.5 PFF grade. We might have something here worth monitoring as we move through the season. And finally, we got another player from the Miami Hurricanes, Francisco Mauigoa. 6 tackles, including tackle and a half for loss, 1 sack, a QB pressure, which was the sack, obviously. 17 points, and I think some of it was in garbage time. 139 rush yards allowed, which is a lot, but again, like Florida was completely unable to throw the ball there, which was the more impactful part of this. But 75.8 PFF grade, that's going to feed families pretty well, I think. And then we're getting to defensive back, which is the final category I have here. And I just decided to lump defensive back together because you have nickel corner and then you have safety. And I don't want to do a separate one for nickel corner. There are only a couple nickel corners that are interesting in the draft this year anyway. So most of these guys are going to be safeties. Every now and then I'll throw in something from a nickel corner. Malachi Starks had one of the coolest interceptions of the year for Georgia. He also had a QB pressure, so he's showing that versatility. And Georgia's defense was dominant. They allowed 4.9 yards per passing attempt. He had 2 tackles as well. 78.4 PFF grade, so Malachi Starks cooking. Jahdae Barron didn't do a lot for Texas, but what he did was impactful for sure. He had 1 interception that he returned for 30 yards, a tackle. Texas allowed 0 points, only 74 passing yards, which was like 3.1 yards per attempt. Really good PFF grade. Barron is a guy who might be like a big nickel or a smaller linebacker. Little bit of an interesting player, a little bit of versatility there. So I think that Jahdae Barron is someone that we should look at as like a nickel linebacker type. Kevin Winston Jr. of Penn State had a notable day for a defense that played fairly well. 12 tackles and a QB pressure. And only allowed 12 points did PSU. 161 passing yards, 5.6 yards per attempt. Pretty good. 61.8 PFF grade, not the best, but pretty good starter game for Kevin Winston Jr. He's one of the top safeties in this class so far. Xavier Watts of Notre Dame in a big win for the Fighting Irish. Xavier Watts, 3 tackles, a pick. They only allowed 100 pass yards to supposedly one of the best quarterbacks in the draft this year in Connor Wegman. Now, you'd be fooled by watching that game. 3.3 yards per attempt. This should be A, not C. And it's same down here as well. But good start for him. He makes a big play on the ball, and his defense locks down. 79.9 PFF grade. Final guy, we got to throw this guy in there, even though I think he's going to be a little bit more of a one-dimensional free safety in the NFL. Keon Saab. 2 tackles, 2 interceptions that he returned for a total of 87 yards. So big-time ball hawk. Great way to start out his season. Alabama allowed 0 points, 103 passing yards, which was 2.6 yards an attempt, and a really good 81.8 PFF grade. So that's the defense. Those are the guys who I want to highlight in this sequence. Thank you for watching. See you guys later. Go Hawks. That is College Football Prospect Wednesday.